Peace for All Mankind, a short story by Lorne Feeser. I will tell the story as it was told to me. The vast, cratered, and barren landscape before Ed and Virgil was fresh to the eyes of mankind. Both of them knew the world would be watching, and their years of training made clear the gravity of the situation. All the same, as they stared through the hatch of their lander, they were giddy like schoolchildren. "Falcon, you are clear for egress to the surface," chimed in the familiar and trusted voice of Matthews from over 200,000 miles away. He was their Capcom, though Virgil preferred to call him the translator. His was the only voice they heard from Mission Control, and he had to train just as long to get his job. But there is a massive difference between the kinds of minds who could make this incredible ride happen, and the kind brave enough to embark upon it, as Virgil liked to remark. Ed agreed with his captain, but always suspected it'd be more accurate to call themselves the ones dumb enough. "Age before beauty." Ed gestured down the ladder for his captain. He knew Captain Virgil White was focused on saying just the right thing, and he smiled, hoping the insubordination would rattle him. It was hard to tell exactly how it landed, as a reflective gold shield obscured his face, protecting him from the raw light of the sun shining through the hatch. Ed had spent plenty of time looking at his captain's face during their week-long journey through the cosmos. His imagination filled in the blank. The captain began moving down the ladder, extending along the leg of the lander. Virgil was clearly struggling to adjust to the bizarre buoyancy that was gravity on the moon, but hoped it wouldn't translate for the camera. He maintained his grip and announced, as he jumped the last few rungs, "Now, mankind takes its largest leap in history." Ed smiled inside of his helmet. He could hear Mission Control clapping through their headsets, and the feeling in his gut told him that he would hear those words again. In a much less dramatic fashion, he crawled down the ladder and joined Virgil on the dusty gray ground. They had almost a full day's mission of experiments ahead, so they got to work immediately. Virgil unpacked and set up the flag, and both of their well-trained bodies instinctively snapped to salute. Ed couldn't help but linger on the sight, but returned to work when the voice of Roger chimed into his headset. Roger was orbiting above in the small capsule which would return them home to Earth. It was starting to feel a little crowded with all these voices in his helmet. "Y'all ain't having too much fun down there, are you?" "Nah, you're not missing anything," Ed quipped back. "View's definitely better from up high." Roger chuckled. "Somehow, I really doubt that." "You can come down next time, Roger," said Virgil, sheepishly. None of them knew what to say next, so the two on the moon returned to gathering samples of rocks and dust. Ed found the silence of the moon to be fascinatingly full. After a week crammed in the small spacecraft, he could finally hear himself think. The pleasantness was short-lived before Capcom livened up his helmet again. "Falcon, this is Mission Control. Be advised there may be a situation developing on the ground. Our landing might have attracted unwanted attention." They heard some sort of sound blaring through their headsets, distorting the translator's familiar voice. Ed couldn't quite make out what it was. "Captain White here, we copy. What's the situation?" When things got serious, Ed always appreciated that Virgil was in charge instead of him. "Nothing to be alarmed about, but there has been a temporary evacuation order issue. Probably another damn test, but so..." The blaring sound was growing louder, and some kind of static broke up the signal altogether. Ed looked up at the source of the signal as if it would help, and stared at the rear view of his home before him. Knots started to tie in his stomach. It was never easy hearing panic in the voice of Mission Control. "Capcom, this is Captain White. Do you copy? I think we're losing signal here." The only answer was static. When Ed saw the first bubbling flash on the surface of the Earth, he instantly understood. That sound was air raid sirens. Another flash confirmed his suspicion. Ed had never paid much attention in geography, but he was pretty sure that one was Mission Control. Virgil must not have been looking up. It was hard to tell through the helmet, because he kept trying. Capcom, repeat, this is Falcon. Do you copy? Ed put his hand on the thick padding of his captain's shoulder and pointed across the ocean of nothing to their home. It began to light up like stars sparking to life in the twilight sky. If they didn't think about it, it was beautiful. One by one, seemingly innocent blips of light erupted across the landmass they called home. As the light faded, duller red colors spread quickly around it like dye, absorbing into a fabric. Both men had nothing to say. It was Roger, high above in orbit, who spoke first. Holy shit. Are you guys seeing this? Yes. Virgil betrayed nothing in his voice. Yes, we are. The lights didn't slow. As the flashes on one continent faded into a mass of burning colors, other continents across the sea began their own display. At least we got the bastards back, Virgil said, to no one in particular. Yeah, I guess we did. It was probably 30 minutes before the bomb stopped falling. It felt like longer. Neither looked away from the end of the world. Commander, Roger broke the silence again. I'm radioing mission control, but all I'm getting is static. Virgil took a deep breath. His microphone picked it up, and it startled Ed. Roger, I don't know what you think you just saw, but I don't think they are going to pick up. Well, Roger replied, irritated, what the hell are we gonna do? I need some orders here. Orders? Do you think they prepared me for this? Do you think I have a clue what the fuck to do? Ed added, I think this probably falls under procedures for mission critical abort. I recall that going something like pack everything up and get off the moon. And then what? Virgil demanded, pointing with exasperation at the Armageddon on the horizon. The roaring colors were taking on depth, filling every crevice in the land. Think about this, Ed. We flew here in a soda can that has to land in the middle of the Atlantic. Unless Mission Control starts to pick up the phone, that might be a real problem. Captain, goddammit, you cannot be serious. There's at least air. We have enough breathable air to last, maybe, a day. That's pushing our mission by 6 hours, and I know you know that. There was a pause. Virgil did know this. A day was liberal. They had scheduled activities for 19 hours, but did have excess oxygen in the lander. They could use that to add a few more hours. A few more hours to the rest of their lives. Roger broke the silence again. Well, I'm sure as shit not gonna sit up here in orbit. I'm headed back to Earth with or without you two. He paused. I'd really rather with. That sounds like 2 votes going, Ed said and started towards their lander. He was stopped by Virgil's massive glove on his shoulder. The captain had lifted his visor, revealing his sunken gaze. He was shaking his head and squinting in the sunlight. If it's just you in that capsule, Roger, you can survive an extra 2 weeks in orbit. That will give you the time you need to reconnect with our people on the ground and find a safe landing site. If all 3 of us go, we're all goners. There was another pause. Ed tried to argue, but was in too much shock for the words to get out. Eventually, he stammered. You don't get to make that call. I'm the captain. I do. We're staying down here. Roger, did you hear me? Yes, sir. I copy, was the reply through the radio. Ed thought he heard relief. Ed burst into laughter. He didn't want to. He knew it wouldn't help. But laughing seemed like the only thing left to do. Roger fired the thrusters on the back of their capsule and flung himself towards the burning Earth. His fiery tail was visible from the surface. Virgil and Ed watched it arc across the cosmos. You've killed us, Virgil, Ed told his captain. Yeah, I realize that, Ed. But but there's worse ways to go. That thought hung in the air as the men continued to look at their damned home. "What do we do now?" Ed asked, not looking away. "I don't know. I'm not in charge anymore. You take a stab at it." "Well, ours might be the only human eyes that will ever gaze the surface of the moon. Might as well go see more of it." So they did. It seemed irrelevant which direction they chose to walk, so Virgil pointed one way, and they marched. "Keep an eye on the time." The captain pointed to the mission timer on his wrist. "We go this way for 6 hours, and then head back to the lander. We can rest there, grab what's left of the air, and go the other way, I suppose." Ed didn't say anything for a while. He decided to focus on the landscape rather than the countdown on his wrist. The view was worth it, too. The quiet stillness was shocking at first, but as he walked, he found its beauty. The rocks they tripped over had not moved since they formed, eons ago. "It reminds me of this park out in the desert out west I take my son to," Ed said. The statement unpacked in his mind as he spoke it, but Virgil saved him from pondering his family. "No, it's too empty for a desert, too flat too, with all those occasional dips, craters I suppose, randomly scattered around. You know what it reminds me of? The ocean, on a peaceful night." They wandered on, towards the close but unreachable horizon, trying not to look up at their ignited world looming in the sky. When they did, they saw that smoke had replaced the clouds. The green and blue world they had left had grown black and red before their eyes. It didn't feel like 6 hours when the timer went off the first time, which horrified both of them. They didn't say anything, just turned around. The dusty ground of the still world had registered every single one of their footprints. They only had to follow them home. "You know, nothing will ever get rid of this path we've made," Virgil mused. "Our footsteps are going to mark the surface until all of creation goes, I think." "Oh, do you mean the rest of it?" Ed tried to shrug. They walked on. Both men were soldiers. Both men knew how to march. But the odd, skipping gait they had adopted in the light gravity wore their muscles thin. The idea of sleeping away the remaining life wasn't appealing, but stretching out on the lander for some time sounded perfect. As they walked, Ed's thoughts shifted to their comrade, for whom he'd already given his life, flying back towards a hope of home. "Do you really think Roger's going to make it?" His captain pondered this for a moment. "He has a chance. We bought him the time he needed by staying down here." Ed chuckled. "Maybe you're right. I guess time was up for us either way." "He's a smart man. There's got to be somewhere he can safely land." There was no way for Virgil to know it, but he was wrong. They made it back before the next 6-hour alarm went off. Evidently, they were getting better at walking on the moon. Both men were awash with relief at the sight of their ship. The three-legged lander glimmered in the sunlight, and the purple and gold flag of their burning nation stood tall to its side. The soldiers automatically stopped to salute the flag before moving back up the ladder, through the soft inflated airlock, and into their cramped but familiar home. No amount of training makes it easy to change out of a moon suit in a tight space, but they did their best before opening the door. Alien dust covered their outfits, and they were good enough campers to know better than to track it into their shelter. "It's good to see your face again, Virgil," Ed said as they stretched inside the habitat. "Yours too, Skip." Virgil opened the cabinet that stored their provisions. The items he pulled out didn't resemble any food they would have ever eaten back at home, but the scientists assured them that it was the best they could manage. They were bricks in tightly sealed plastic, flavored for choice. Virgil and Ed ate them like a delicacy. "My thanks to the agency," Ed raised a brick for a toast, "for this incredible last meal." Full of hydrogenated protein and with muscles fatigued from the strange abuse of their moonwalk. It became clear to Ed that he had no choice but to sleep. "You should too, Captain," said Ed, grabbing his sleeping bag. "We made it back early. We can afford to sleep for an hour." "I will. I'm just gonna take stock of our remaining air, then I'll catch a few winks." Virgil was gone when Ed awoke. Ed assumed he was still dreaming. There weren't very many places for his captain to go. After sitting a moment in a daze, he noticed a handful of oxygen canisters neatly stacked near the hatch for the airlock. A note was on top. It read, "Explore the moon. I've bought you some time too." Ed felt his whole stomach fall out of his torso. He didn't know what to feel, so anger set in. He crumpled the note and moved quickly through the small space to scan the windows. He knew where to look. His captain sat outside, facing the flag. Ed gulped. The suited figure was not moving, but that didn't mean he wasn't alive. Not wasting any time, Ed glided to the airlock and threw open the hatch. He put on his massive suit as quickly as he could be thorough, and then carefully opened the hatch to vacuum. The atmosphere around him hissed away as the rays of the sun poured in. He felt no ceremony this time descending the ladder, just adrenaline. He found Virgil's golden faceplate lifted up. His face beneath was blue and calm. His bulging red eyes were open and locked on the infernal world above. Ed followed his captain's gaze and joined him, staring at their home for some time. It was the last thing he could do together. After that, he was truly alone. Eventually, he made his way back up the ladder and into the suddenly large and empty lander. The canisters of air remained in their stack, and Ed started calculating how much more life was in them. He landed on another 2 days, give or take. "What the hell am I supposed to do for 2 days on the damn moon, Captain?" Ed said, looking out the window at the seated figure. "More long walks from crater to crater? Experiments? Do I have to collect rock samples for the folks back home?" He kicked a canister of air, and then immediately cursed himself for it. It was then that the gravity of his gratitude set in. He wanted every minute those canisters had in them. Ed ate another brick of food and made his way back to the airlock. Long walks from crater to crater it was. Ed didn't enjoy his second walk across the surface of the moon very much. The silence began ringing in his ear. The scenery was losing its charm as well. As he made his solitary track across the gray landscape, his mind kept searching for something that moved, anything else that he could share life with, and for hours of wandering, there was nothing. The only sound was the swishing of the air he breathed, and the rhythm of him breathing it. Then he saw something he couldn't possibly have seen. He saw tracks scattered in the dust, clear paths of 2 sets, circling around the area and then walking to and from the site. Ed whipped around to look at his own footprints to the scene, assuming he'd gotten turned around somehow. But when he compared the tracks, it was clear they were not his. His boots had squared edges and left tracks with circles in the tread. He kneeled down for a good look at the bizarre record in the dust. These footprints were the same size, but rounded, with short horizontal lines forming the tread. This was not a simple thing for Ed to process. Had another nation already landed? How could his not have known? He packed it. He paced around the site of the rogue footprints, carefully keeping his own separate. "If I follow the trail, I'll find the source," he muttered to himself, and looked towards the path of the tracks coming to and from the site. They made a visible trail to the uncomfortably close horizon. So, Ed followed that trail. It led on for some time, occasionally breaking off in other directions to circle around for a bit, but the general trend was clear. What wasn't clear was how long ago they were laid. Ed remembered what his captain had said, how his own tracks would scar this surface for all of time. All of time was a disturbingly large time frame for these scars before him. After an hour or two, Ed found the source. He followed the tracks over a ridge and into a wide-open crater. As his head came over the crest, he saw two familiar, yet foreign shapes. It took him time to process them. He saw what his mind told him was the legs of a lander, with a faded flag standing to its side. It looked exactly as his landing site would have looked had they ever taken off to rendezvous with Roger. Not exactly, he realized as he got closer. There were 4 legs on the leftover spacecraft, not 3 like his lander, though they shared a similar reflective foil. When he was close enough to analyze the flag, he could make out faint red stripes with a blue patch in the corner. It was certainly not his proud flag, nor was it any flag he recognized. Inspecting the 4-legged platform, he found a metal plate with a picture of his world, though the continents were slightly misformed. Under the image, there was a writing in a language he did not recognize. He didn't know what it meant, but it read, "Here men from the planet Earth set foot upon the moon. July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind." Ed fell to his knees, struggling suddenly to stay upright and against the weight of his bulky life support system on his back. He felt tears bursting from his eyes as he gave in to the waves of emotion ripping across his consciousness. It was too much to take in. It didn't make any sense. That's where I found him, shaking his fist and cursing his damned home above, no longer carrying any regard for his time remaining. I had caught word that the Earth was burning, and was flying my ship to observe from the safety of the moon. I didn't expect to find life signs on the primitive world's airless satellite, so I assumed I had found a fellow observer. I was as confused as Ed when I landed and discovered this sad creature. I couldn't recognize the Earthling in his giant, overcomplicated spacesuit, and certainly wouldn't have expected to find one of the warlike primates there in the first place. I made my way down the hatch and approached the figure, broadcasting in as many spacefaring languages as I could. "Hello there. Are you lost? Do you need a ride to your ship?" The human immediately rose from his knees and began to run away. As he did, I finally recognized the insignia and languages that adorned his suit. From my studies of the world, I knew these to be from one of the large industrial powers who had conquered about half the surface. One of the two who had engaged in the conflict that had consumed the world. Fortunately, I had a translation algorithm for the language downloaded. I switched it on and attempted a soothing voice. "There's no need to fear. My name is Aru. I'm here to help. Do you need a ride back to your planet? Or another one?" "Aru? Are you an alien?" Ed sounded the words out slowly, as if tasting them. "To you, I suppose. I'd argue that you're the alien to me." "What are you doing here?" Ed asked me. "I'm just here to watch the lights." Can you believe it? You apes have set the darn thing on fire again. Ed pondered this a moment. "Again? Oh, my dear monkey, don't feel bad," I told him, and followed his gaze up to the ash-covered world. "This isn't even the second time you've burned it all down." Peace for All Mankind was written and narrated by Lorne Feeser. Music, recording, and audio was done by Davis Wright. Illustrations were made by Savannah Deal. Special thanks to Sean Feeser, Ian Gregg, and Noah Chen for helping make this story what it became. And thanks to you for listening.